Hi, thank you for joining me. This session we're going to talk about the book of Joshua. The book of Joshua follows the first 5 books of the Bible. It's the 6th in the Bible. It's found in the Old Testament of the Scripture, and it follows immediately after the first 5 books known as the Pentateuch, or the books of the law, or the books or writings of Moses. Those are comprised of the first 5 books: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. In them, God has made a promise and a mandate that he is going to fulfill, beginning, it seems, here in the book of Joshua. He made a promise, he made a covenant with Abraham that I'm going to make of you a great people. Everywhere you set your foot, I'm going to give to you and your descendants as an inheritance. And now he is bringing the nation of Israel, and I mean that in the best possible terms. He is bringing, meaning he's going with them into the promised land. And as he brings them with him into the promised land, he's going to go with them in leading them by taking Joshua as their new commander-in-chief. You see, Moses had been the deliverer. He brought them out of bondage in Egypt. But Moses committed a terrible atrocity, a sin, and he misrepresented God, clearly misrepresented the salvation, and therefore God said, your punishment is you're not going to be able to go into the promised land. Joshua, who had been faithful, one of the 2 of the 12 spies that Moses sent into this promised land almost 40 years prior to this, he, along with a man named Caleb, came back with the same report, but said God is able to do exceedingly abundantly whatever he needs in order to bring us into the promised land. Well, Joshua is now able to take the nation of Israel into the promised land. But it's a very sad moment here at the beginning, because the book of Joshua has about 4 natural breaks. The first 5 chapters are the nation of Israel entering the promised land. Chapter 6 to 12, roughly, is the conquering of the promised land. They're going to face battles and challenges and difficulties, and God's going to get them through. Chapters 13 to 22, they're now going to divide the land among the tribes of Israel and give them their allotted portion. This is in fulfillment of what God had promised to Abraham and his descendants, to Isaac, and to Isaac's son Jacob, who had his 12 sons, and each one of the 12 sons and their progeny are going to inherit their portion in the land of promise, or the land of Israel. It's an amazing event, an amazing story. And the last section, chapters 23 and 24, are the farewell of Joshua. He's turning the people over to God, and then they're going to be now treated as adults in their relationship with God. You see, the entire book of Joshua, from my perspective, is God who is establishing his nation. He made a promise and a covenant. He took them out of slavery in Egypt. He brought them to the edge of the promised land. They sent spies in, failed to go in because of their unbelief, and then had to wander for almost 40 years in the wilderness, where God allowed that generation of disbelief to perish in the wilderness. But yet he provided for them every day, and he provided manna every day. He followed them as the rock that followed them, according to the letter to Hebrews, that provided for them. He provided water from the rock. He was always there for them, for the entire nation, and it was a great journey as they were growing to maturity and to be able to rely on God and his provision and leadership. Now they're going into the promised land. When they go into the promised land, there are some major changes. First, Joshua is now taking over. So Moses has now passed, Joshua is taking over, and he now cries out to God and asks in prayer for God's blessing. And God, of course, blesses him and gives him the encouragement that just as I was with Moses, I'm going to be with you. He then spies out the land. He doesn't send representatives of the people. He sends in 2 spies. The 2 spies go into a place called Jericho. And when they go into Jericho, they meet this woman named Rahab, who's a harlot. And Rahab, this wonderful woman, hides those spies. She believes that God is the deliverer. She pleads with them, and they say, if you do as we say, and you hang the scarlet cord out of this window, anyone who's in your household will be protected when the calamity comes. Then God gives the nation of Israel the opportunity to deal with Jericho. So they come back, the spies come back, and God says, this is what I want you to do. First of all, there are men who have not been circumcised in the wilderness. We have to settle that issue. Are you going to be part of the covenant that I made with your father Abraham or not? And they made a decision to follow. Then you find that the miraculous happens. Joshua then says, okay, we've crossed over through this Jordan River, and God makes the priest step in and take steps of faith. He dries up the Jordan River. And as they're about to face Jericho, which is a formidable city, it's fortified, the spies have spied it out, but yet God is going to deliver them. Joshua, he goes down to the bank of the river and he prays. And he is met by this angel who's imposing, a great man with a sword. And he says to that man with the sword, he said, are you for us or are you against us? And the angel that spoke to him identifies himself. I am the angel of the host of the Lord's armies. And that says something remarkable. It's as if he says to him, you're looking at it incorrectly. It's not, am I on your side or on your enemy's side? It's, I represent the Lord God. Are you on his side? And he's trying to set the tone for every battle that they're going to face and every battle that we are going to face. If we want to have victory, we need to rely upon the Lord and move in his power and his might. So God sets him straight right away fast. They go in, they get their marching orders to go around Jericho. As they march around Jericho for 6 days, they're silent. The seventh day, they do it just musically with the sounds of the trumpets and the horns. Then they shout, and God delivers the nation of Jericho into their hand. The walls of the city collapse inward, and without having to raise a sword or a bow, God has defeated a formidable foe. This is an amazing adventure. Now, when you go to Rahab, it works out very well for Rahab, and you find her even in the genealogy and lineage of King David, and eventually through Jesus Christ the Messiah. When you move down through chapter 5, there's a defeat right after Jericho at a small city called Ai, because the nation of Israel, instead of relying on God and his direction, look at this small town and say, we can take that, and they want to go to battle in their own strength, and they're soundly defeated. Joshua cries out. He says, God, how could you have let this terrible thing happen? And God said, get up off your knees, Joshua. There's sin in the camp. Let's deal with the sin. God causes them to deal ruthlessly with the sin in the camp. Then God allows for them and provides for them to have victory. This is going to be the model presented when they listen to the Lord and they do things God's way. They have great victory. They move in through their campaigns. They split what we would call the nation of Israel. They split it in half. They move into a southern campaign, then a northern campaign. These are chapters 6 to 12. It's an amazing adventure, God teaching them miraculous lessons along the way. But one of the first things that happens is when they go into the promised land, that miraculous manna, that food that God delivered them every day, now that's no longer available to them. And now they're to rely on the provision that God gives them even in the promised land. So he's teaching them that I want you to grow. No longer are you going to be reliant upon just the milk of the word. He doesn't want us to stay spiritual infants. He wants us to grow to maturity. And if he wants to make his people a great and mighty nation, he has to allow them to grow and to mature. And they're growing and they're maturing and they're able to go from God fighting battles without them raising a hand, to them being able to be victorious. And then when you see the land even divided, you'll see a man named Caleb, his daughter, comes to him and says, we'd really like to have an inheritance over here, and there are bad people over there. And Caleb looks to his daughter and said, but it's okay for you to go. And she said, I'm strong enough. I really want the best. I don't want anything second rate from God. I want whatever God will give for me. Caleb himself, when he's at this point 80 years old, he asked Joshua for a special area in the hill country where he knows that there are giants. These are chapters 12 to 22. And as you see this man Caleb, who had been one of the two spies with Joshua that spied out the land 40 years ago, here's a man who's now in his 80s, and he's saying, what a remarkable God. And I'm still as fit as I was when I was in my youth. And I know there are giants up there, but that's the land I want. I want the best. And God allows him and then delivers that land into his hand. These are the high points in the book of Joshua. You see men and women acting faithfully. You see them making good decisions, healthy decisions, and through even the bad decisions, they're learning and they're growing and they're deepening their relationship with God so that eventually you start to see things like we can stand strong regardless of what the rest of the world does. We know that God is with us. And then as the last or the closing section of the book of Joshua, Joshua gives his farewell. He pleads with them to observe the law, to keep in mind God, but he anticipates that they're going to fall away. It's prophetic in what he says, and when you pick up in the book of Judges, you see that they fulfill even the sadness of what he's telling as a warning to them. He said, you know what? If you do what you know is right, you're going to continue to be victorious. But if you choose to become complacent or you turn away from the true and living God, you're going to find that you're going to have failure and no longer victory. And when we pick up the book of Judges in the next session, you're going to see that each man does what is right in their own eyes, and there's failure upon failure. So God bless you. Thank you for being with me.